Hey guys, this is NW97 for another Destiny video, and today we're basically going to conclude from the last two videos I've made of which rocket launcher is better, and the reason why I'm doing these quote-unquote series is because of, you know, a lot of questions has been rising up, what's the best weapon to use against Aksis, and just by proving it, here's some gameplay in the background right now, fighting Aksis. So here's the thing though. In the first video we've made with our quote-unquote series, we've had what's better, Hunger Crota or Hazon's Vengeance, and we said Hunger Crota for just random PvE play, and then for part two we had Warpath versus Hazon's Vengeance, and Warpath seems to be the winner of this choice, and for some reason the Hazon's Vengeance does not get any love from me. So it's just one of those rocket launchers. So here's the basically the application of the Warpath right now. What is better, Dark Drinker, Warpath, or any other rocket launchers? So what I did as of this video last week when Aksis was in challenge mode, I have done challenge mode with Aksis, and I've been using the Warpath. And my build is I have two fusion grenades with Viking Funeral, just like the Starfighter Protocol, which does extra damage, like 15% boost of damage if you have like one or two grenades sticked on Aksis. Which is actually really good way for damaging Aksis, and also it's also good because if you're doing the challenge mode and your super energy is going to be charged like all the time, so you literally have like three cases of using your grenades. Okay, so I had that build with my Sunsinger. I also had the Warpath, of course, just for experimentation and all that, and I had Black Spindle because there's gonna be times where like I'm going to be doing damage before like the main damage phase with Aksis, and I am using Black Spindle basically as a background and all that. And then like of course we have like a Warpath, just like I said. And I noticed that not only the Warpath is good for fighting against Aksis, but it's also really good against in case like when you're if your friends like the in charge of the Scorch Cannon and he needs help, well, you could just throw down a rocket towards the captain, and he doesn't have to worry about as much damage and all that, which is actually pretty convenient because sometimes I feel that the captain is just sometimes he feels a bit overpowered, if you know what I mean. For those of you who've used the Scorch Cannons, you'll completely understand what I'm saying. So what I've done is that we had two people, me and a good friend of mine, Carito. He's basically a raid Sherpa. He helps all sorts of people do the raid and all that. And me and him were actually helping this one guy who'd never done challenge mode before. And I think that was his first time actually playing the raid. So we helped him to complete Aksis challenge mode, which was very cool. His name is Russell, so give a shout out to Russell and all that, I guess. We had a couple of people use Dark Drinker. We had a couple of people use the Warpath, including me and Carito. And we just had random people use other stuff like Black Spindle, using different weapons, like Ex Machina. It's a pretty mixed crowd, and so with this setup, there's gonna be different fluctuations with damage, right? So there was one guy who was using Ray Slider. He was doing pretty good damage. Like basically above average, which you're supposed to do. Carito was doing using the Warpath, of course, and he was doing like the second most amount of damage out of all of our team. And I was actually the one who was doing the most damage out of all of us. As you can see in like the transportation phase, like you're about to see me use my really three things instead of one thing. Like you see, the main way to like damage Aksis is using the Scorch Cannons, which is okay. By the way, the best way to damage Aksis. I am actually using Black Spindle for going against. I'm actually using Black Spindle to, against Aksis during the damage phases until like the last teleportation. So I basically use my Sunsinger build slash my Black Spindle for between damage phases. I noticed this build is actually really good for people who are not using the Scorch Cannon. So for those who aren't using the Scorch Cannon, that basically their deal is they have to focus on challenge mode and using the Black Spindle and the Sunsinger build with the Starfire Protocol. And then in the end of the teleportation, you would use the warpath. And according to a Reddit post and some YouTube videos, they actually show that there are chances where the warpath is doing as much damage as more damage than Dart Drinker. But here's the thing, though: warpath and Dart Drinker, it fluctuates between what does more damage and what does the same amount of damage and what does better damage. Now the thing about the warpath is that its cluster bombs, depending on where it lands on Aksis, it depends on how much damage like it does. And I've noticed that the best part of you want to shoot Aksis is around the chest area. So if you have the warpath, make sure you shoot at the chest area, and then you have the most cluster bombs spread out as much evenly as possible, so that it'll hit all the legs and it'll hit all of his body and all that, so he can do the extra damage. And plus, with the 15% bonus going on with the Sun Singer, not to mention the Night Stalker and all that, and the Defender Bubble, then it's gonna stack up and it's gonna do a lot more damage. So it's basically the reason why I was doing the most damage is not only I was using the Warpath, which was actually helping me a lot, but I was also using other accessories. So what makes this build really good with the Warpath is with the Dart Drinker, you're only doing damage against the against Aksis, right? Using the Dart Drinker, and you are doing as much damage as possible going against him, right? That's like your only weapon you're using for damage. I kind of like this build better with the Warpath because you not only you can use your Black Spindle, your Sunsinger grenades, or even like Melting Point for those Sunbreakers out there, but you can also use the Warpath as well, and it just basically gives you more variety on what you use for damaging him, and I think that I like that the most. Like it's not gonna be like a singular thing that I use against Aksis. It's not gonna be only the Dart Drinker, and if I'm not Scorch Cannon Bearer, then I'm just not gonna stand there and do stuff and all that. And quite frankly, it might be a little bit dangerous. Like if you're empowered and if you're empowered and if you're like if you're empowered and if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, you're just focusing damage on Aksis, then you're probably going to make a mistake. But the thing is, as long as you have experience, then like it's gonna be fine. Even if you're doing damage against Aksis, then you're doing a lot of damage. And you can see here, I'm doing the most damage off all of them. Not only using, actually, I was only using Black Spindle in my Sunsinger build. So if you're doing that during the between phases, then you're going to do a lot of damage against Aksis. And using the Warpath, if you have a legendary weapon doing as much damage as an exotic weapon, and sometimes more, then that's basically worth using the weapon, and you could use other, weapons besides the Black Spindle. You could use Red Death so that you don't have to worry about dying from like the aura that Aksis is using. You don't have to worry about the Shanks like killing you. You could use like the new exotics that you're using the new exotics that came out with solar damage, so that if you like going against the captain and like with like the burn and all that, you could use the Genesis Chain, you could use Fatebringer, etc., etc. You can also use stuff like Outbreak Prime. Those are excellent going against the captains, and you could use that. You could use just some random things. Basically, the Warpath gives you more options on using your build instead of like using just Dart Drinker, Ex Machina, and like the Fatebringer or the what is it called? Whatever the scout rifle from the Trials of Osiris is called. Everyone's just using that particular build, and sometimes just having things more fun just has a better variety of using certain builds and all that. I actually had a lot of fun doing this run for Access. I was using something new. I was using something that I wasn't really like taking advantage of, especially using the Sunsinger build so much since I was so focused on using the Dart Drinker, right? It's like, oh, like I would be using either I use the Dart Drinker or I don't use the Dart Drinker and I just focus on my Sunsinger. Well, now I don't have to focus on, using Dart Drinker alone with damage. I could just focus on you know, using Black Spindle, using Warpath, and using my Sunsinger. And look at this right now. Like, you see, I'm just doing damage because I don't care, you know? I'm like in a perfect position. I'm using my grenades, and it's just a really good way of, using the strategy that we are using right now. So, the thing about the Black Spindle is, I think it's probably like underused. Like the only reason that you'll use the Black Spindle is using with War Priest or using it with Golgoroth, which is probably the best weapon to use like overall with Golgoroth. And here it comes right now. I'm actually shooting the rockets below his legs, but I'm really supposed to use it around like his chest area, like right here. And you can just see those numbers just going all over the place. And look how much damage this is doing. So it not only that, like once I've used all of my ammo, it gives me more time to use sniper ammo, which is actually really good. Even took like a couple of Fatebringer shots. So that's what makes the Warpath actually better than the yeah than the Hazon's Vengeance. Is because it has a faster fire rate, and I believe it has faster reload speed as well. So with these basically it has the Warpath. I personally believe that the Warpath is probably better, not because if it does more damage. Like honestly, you can really debate on whether it does more damage or whether it fluctuates or it's even worth using it. But honestly, I say it's worth using it. Not only even though Dark Drinker is probably overall a better weapon, and there are probably YouTubers like Dado who prefer to use Dark Drinker because he knows that it's gonna be guaranteed that he's gonna get this certain amount of damage every time he comes towards Aksis, using Defender Bubble and just spinning around and doing that much damage. Um, I don't know. It just seems to me that with the Warpath, you seem to be standing in one spot more instead of just moving around. And for some reason, it just seems to be a better option of just staying at one spot. So, here's the thing though. With having the Warpath available, there's probably one thing you have to worry about. The only thing you have to worry about is like someone popping a Defender Bubble and there's going to be like right in front of you, and if you like, if you see the timing go right, then you're gonna blow yourself up, and that's gonna be instant fight. That's probably the reason why a lot of YouTubers don't like using a rocket launcher for you against Access, right? So that might be the reason, but even then, like if you're a professional Destiny player or like a Sherpa, what me and Karito are doing, then it's not going to be much of a problem, really. You're going to keep focus on one thing, and you're going to do it while you're doing it. And even though that if you're going to do as much, even though that you're going to do something different, and there's an added thing into the game, right? There's gonna be there's just gonna be one of those things like, oh, like, what if the Destiny community decides to use Warpath instead of Dart Drinker? Then you're gonna have some more wipes involving, getting killed with, killing himself with bubbles, killing yourself from like, shanks, etc. Right? And that's gonna be, a problem. So, um, the thing is though that if you're going to have those problems, then you're going to have the issue where you're going to have to transition. And, for some reason, transitioning always has growing pains. Like, if you play Crucible, you know of this thing. The meta changes, and you are switching to a certain weapon. Everyone just doesn't like it, but they get really good at it, and then they get good at it. Sometimes it's just good having, like, a meta change for PvE using different things for PvE, you know. And honestly, we never really had this like thing happen before. Having basically something new like drop in PvE, and it actually happens with PvP all the time. With PvE though, like there's usually a certain set of like weapons. Like Fatebringer was always good. Sleeper Simulant is always handy against boss battles. Gjallarhorn is just good for everything. Um, so those things are always going to be there. But then you're gonna have something like Black Spindle. It's a surprise thing, or no time to explain. Like what does better damage, or the Chaos Dogma. Stuff like that. It's just gonna be Warpath is just gonna be one of those weapons either everyone loves, that's either someone loves or people just doesn't care about. Like I know people right now that does love use Chaos Dogma because they continue to shoot, even though something like the Outbreak Prime or Black Spindle, Sleeper Simulant will, or in Life Drinker will do much more damage, right? Even then, it's destiny. It's your destiny to use your certain builds that you want to use. So with that in mind, personally, I think I might be using the Warpath from now on every time I go against Aksis. Because just the way how it feels, the way how it flows. Like I feel like the Life Drinker was just someone else's style, and when I started using it, it was like my own style. So I was using my own style against Aksis, and it just felt extremely comfortable to me. And heck, it felt so comfortable. We just had someone, do the raid, never done the raid before, and we're just, doing this thing um, where it just benefits something. So, so the question is Warpath better than Life Drinker? It's basically gotten to the point where it's completely debatable. I say that Warpath is probably about as does the yeah. Okay, let me repeat that. It's one of those things that it's just one of those things arguments where that anything can go. I personally think it's totally worth it using the Warpath. Some people say it isn't, and it's I don't know. It's just one of those things where I prefer to like have you decide on. Like, if you're going to use the warpath, like, hey, use the warpath. As long as you don't die, then you're good. If you decide to use the Dark Drinker, then hey, use the Dark Drinker. If you would prefer to use the Sleeper Simulant, even though it doesn't do as much damage as the Dark Drinker or the Warpath, then hey, use the Sleeper Simulant as long as you're accurate and as long as you do like extra stuff, just make sure you're a teammate, you know. You can focus on taking out captains. You can focus on the shanks. You're probably not focused as much as Aksis, but you're going to help out with with the team and all that. And actually a lot of people instead of like focusing on Aksis damage during phases, like they completely don't use the scorch cannons for the first two teleports, and they just use the scorch cannons like throughout all over because they want to completely focus on the teleportation and the challenge modes. Honestly, every time I play, I always do damage against Aksis. Like I always use the Scorch Cannons like during the teleportation phase, and it actually does give you more damage to do. And like once everyone finishes using their teleportation, and like once Aksis is just stationary, and using the Scorch Cannons after the third phase, then you take out your Dark Drinker, then you take out your Warpath, right? And then you use those weapons for the end, and you could do even more damage. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that you could actually use the Scorch Cannons to do damage during the teleportation phase. And a lot of people don't do this, and it actually kind of frustrates me sometimes. Even though it's risky, it does have high reward, and I honestly recommend that you should do that. So make sure to use the scorch cannons if you're in charge of scorch cannons. And make sure everything is in position and all of that. Um, like look at this right here. Like the guy who is supposed to go up here, he slams and he has a scorch cannon. And it seems to me see, like right here, we're focused on using scorch cannons, right? And they do the most damage out of everything, right? Actually, if you do the math correctly, if you use like all the scorch cannons on normal mode, besides using them against the servitors, then it's going to basically kill him in all 5 rotations, including all the scorch cannons that's used for the servitor on normal mode. Even though it's hard mode, you're still gonna all those scorch cannons are still really handy to go against, right? And so using those scorch cannons are just extremely handy to use. Like, so if you want to like get rid of Aksis as fast as possible, make sure you use the scorch cannons for with the first 2 teleports, and on the third teleport you use your sleeper simulant, you use your warpath, you use your dart drinker, and your extra sniper ammo if you're using the warpath, and black spindle and all that. And honestly, I feel with this build that Black Spindle and Warpath are like bread and butter, just smoothed, very correctly with how Aksis works out. So if you're going to use Warpath, I highly recommend using Black Spindle. If you don't have Black Spindle, like I know a lot of people don't have Black Spindle, then use Ex Machina. It's overall a good weapon, honestly. I call Ex Machina the year 3 version of Black Hammer, which was just basically Black Spindle back at year 1. Okay. So in conclusion, make sure that you go ahead and if you're using the Warpath, make sure you use Black Spindle. Honestly, with this build, I recommend that if you're not the Scorched Cannon runner, you should probably not use the build I'm using, with the Sun Singers and Starfire Protocols and you know the Black Hammer, etc. Just make sure you don't use that build. It's probably a better idea to use a Titan with a Scorched Cannon, or really any class. As long as you use your Scorched Cannons like fully, then you could go ahead and transition into using the Warpath or Dark Drinker and all that. Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure if you're the Scorched Cannon user, I recommend you don't use the Warpath. Really, um, basically think of like this: with the with if you're charge thrower, then you should use the Warpath or any other weapons. But if you're not, then I recommend you use Dark Drinker or any other sword. That actually could mesh well with like how certain builds can do. I know a lot of people like to mess with like certain strategies using Aksis, especially with the teleportation phases and the challenge mode. So I guess what you should do is you should have like 3 people use Dart Drinker, and you should have like 3 people use Warpath with Black Spindle, and then they could focus on damage and all that, right? And then so you have those 3 people who are in charge of cannons. They go ahead and complete the get the cannons, right? And then yeah, they use those cannons, right? And so since they're using those cannons, you could have like all the other guys focus on using Black Spindle fire and just Sun Singer stuff, Night Stalker, etc. And they should focus on that. And then once it's the last damage phase, like the everyone who's the runner, they could once they finish their scorch cannon, they just go down. Probably one of them is a defender bubble, and they could use their dart drinker and do as much damage as possible, while everyone else in the distance uses the warpath and all that. And hey, I guess that's a good strategy. Maybe 2 Sun Singers, 2 Hunters, and 2 Titans. Having and have 3 people go and become using Warpath Black Spindle, and have 3 people use the Dark Drinker, and all of that. So, with that said, Warpath is definitely worth your time using, and I highly recommend that you use it. And if you want to try something new, and it's actually really fun to use. It's definitely worth using because you always fluctuate between doing as much damage as Dark Drinker while doing more damage than Dark Drinker. Okay, guys, thank you guys for watching. I know this is a long video, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And comment below on what you think that you should use the Warpath or not, and if Dark Drinker is better, right? And tell me what you use during Aksis. Okay, guys, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a good day. Thank you guys. God bless, and goodbye. And Russell, if you're watching, you're welcome. Ready, guys. Okay. Okay. I'm grabbing it. Get ready, guys. Okay. Let's go. Oh, I missed it. Crap. My bad, guys. I don't. I don't know. I don't know. Crap. I. Yeah. Yeah, that was. I think that was the first time I've ever done that, actually.